So can you please introduce yourself for me and tell me a fun fact about you?
Sure, I'm Prentice from the band Vistas, and I'm colorblind as well.
My next question for you is an icebreaker that we had at our freshman orientation. The question is, if you can be any item in the kitchen, what would you be and why?
Ooh. I'd probably be a French press, or like a cafetiere like that you make coffee in, because I don't know, just because I like coffee and I like French presses. So probably just that's for that reason alone, probably just that.
That's pretty cool. I said I'd be a knife because I have a sharp blade. It's terrible. That's so terrible. Okay, so I listened to your album in full, and I have to say it was probably one of my favorite albums during quarantine.
Oh, that's very kind. Thank you very much.
I personally loved the kind of story that went through the album. At least that's what I got from it. I love listening to albums in full. I feel like a lot of people don't do that as much anymore, and it was such a pleasure to listen to something that was kind of like upbeat and happy during this such depressing time. So, can you
Sure. Yeah.
tell me a little bit about the story behind the creation of the album?
Yeah. Sure. Well, it was the album was sort of written over maybe a kind of year and a half to sort of 2 year period, from maybe like sort of early 2018, and it was just it, all of the songs were written just in the process of us, going on tour and like releasing music and planning to do big gigs and things like that. So the songs themselves kind of document the progress of Vistas, I guess, from when we were like, oh, let's try and get some songs together to get an album, and then when we actually recorded it. So that's sort of the creation of it, I guess, and the sort of themes maybe, or the story that kind of runs through it, is about it's sort of about your that period between your sort of last teenage years before you move into adulthood, and then when you reach adulthood, you're kind of nostalgic for your teenage years, but then you're also looking forward to what's happening, but what's going to happen in the future in your life. But it's a bit scary because nobody really sort of prepares you for those kind of early adolescent years. So yeah, that's sort of the main themes of the record. Yeah.
I thought it was something so personal in a sense because it's the band's experience, but at the same time, it relates to so many people just based on the message and the story alone, especially through the lyrics. I thought the lyrics paired extremely well with the composition of the instrumentals. Just they balance each other so well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, yeah.
So my next question for you is, what is your favorite part of a song that you've written?
Um, I think for when we play it live, um, in retrospect, which is on the album as well, but it was one of the two songs we actually re-recorded for the album. But um, so we've played that song live like hundreds and hundreds of times now, and after the second chorus, there's a sort of like a kind of heavy guitar solo-y sort of bit, um, and then halfway through that, there's like a stop where the full band stops and goes in complete silence for like a brief second. And when we do that live, that's one of the moments I always look forward to the most, because it's like a really good feeling when you're just like you're playing a gig and you're like, we're really tight as a band and everything, and that moment you can't really slip up because it's just literally just complete silence. So I think that's like one of my favorite moments in the song, just that little tiny little gap, like, and I mean it's just silence, but I really enjoy it.
It's probably great live just because you can probably hear the echo in the room of the
Yes,
sound.
for sure.
That's fantastic.
Occasionally you can hear people like occasionally you can hear people's conversations because it's just like loud silence, and then people. It's that thing in movies where like it goes silent and then someone says something really embarrassing really loud and then it goes back in. I mean that's never actually happened, but like that's kind of what I want to happen.
That's so cool. I wish I could experience that live currently, but of course.
Same.
So, what is your favorite part of the recording process?
I don't know. I love recording. Like I absolutely love being in the studio and stuff. And I think for the album recording, we were in a residential studio, which is the first time we'd ever done that, and I just loved it. I thought it was great. Just sort of the studio we're in was like a converted like church building, and then up the stairs they had our bedrooms and stuff, and that's where we were sleeping. It was just really cool to be like up the stairs, and then if you had a little idea or whatever, you could just go down, no matter what time of the day it was. Like, it could be the middle of the night, and you could just jot stuff down. So I don't know. I love like I love just seeing it all come together. Like, you lay down the drums, and then you put the bass on top of it, and then gradually the song just builds out more and more. And I think some of the most special moments in the studio are when someone just has an idea and they go, oh, let's just try and put this over the top of it. We've never tried it before. Let's just try it. And then you hear it and it completely just takes the song up another level. So little moments like that are great. But yeah, as well as playing live, I can't wait to get back into the studio. I'm really looking forward to that.
I feel like in the studio, it's nice to sometimes hear all of the isolated parts come together for like the first time. And then, as you were saying, like those little nuances that are added just based on spur of the moment decisions make sometimes so much of a difference in a track. And it can take a couple of listens sometimes to hear all of those things.
No, definitely, yeah.
That's personally one of my favorite parts of listening to an album. Going through it so many different times to listen to all the different parts, because you guys put so much work into it, and it's so nice and refreshing as a listener to hear so many of the different things that go into it. So
yeah, definitely.
So thank you for that.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
So as you mentioned for the recording process, that it's so kind of, at least for me, fascinating to see how like you guys are there, and you're there for that whole segment of time. When you're writing the songs that you do, is there a specific process that you go through?
I usually tend to I just kind of write something based on an idea that I get. So anything just sort of pops into my head, I'll just record it in my voice notes on my phone, and then I'll usually go back and listen to stuff, and then if I go, oh, that's good, then I'll try and work on it, and then 50% of the time it might become a song, 50% of the time it's maybe just not that good an idea. So that's usually how I do it. I usually do the music first and then the words last, and yeah, and I think it's nice as well that like I write as well with the chap who produced our album. So it's called Rich Turvey. So I write a bunch of songs with him, and from working with him, not only in the recording studio but then also when we write together and stuff, I picked up a lot of knowledge into how to make my demos actually sound the way I kind of want them to, which allows you to write in a way that is suited for the studio, so that when you're going in, you've got the parts worked out and things like that, and you've already started those ideas of, oh, maybe we could have keyboards here, or maybe we could have tambourine here, or things like that. So I think from working on it, my writing has definitely improved as a result of getting slightly better at making demos and production and things like that. So yeah.
I love that. I love how you mentioned that it kind of goes through this whole type of process, and I've honestly never heard that before from anyone, that when you're writing, you're intentionally thinking of, okay, maybe this can go here based on all the different factors. Like you mentioned, like tambourine can go on a song, and like you put spaces in the song in your head for those.
Yeah, no, I think it's important because it kind of cuts down on some of the work when you're in the actual studio, because you've formed those ideas before. And then also, I think in the studio as well, it could be quite a high pressure environment, because everyone wants to play the best that they can, and everyone wants to get the best takes down, the best drum takes, the best bass guitar takes, the best vocal takes. So if you're not having to worry about, like, if you've got everything worked out beforehand, then you can just focus on giving your best performance. So I think that lends itself quite well to getting the best out of a recording as well.
Earlier you mentioned voice notes, so we actually have a question that relates to this. Our PR director, Grace, came up with it, and the question, I'll give it a little backstory first, came about because of the Little Peep songs that were released, how they kind of sounded like unfinished bedroom demos, and then Mac Miller's Circles came out, which had approval from his family and the producer he worked with. So the question is, what is your opinion on releasing an artist's unreleased music after they've passed away? Should it be released or should it not?
No, I think it's obviously dependent on the person, and yeah, as I say, I think it's definitely based on the person, and I think the people who are closest to that person would know if that's if the person who passed away, if they would want people to hear this music. Maybe if it's something that is it's maybe slightly too personal or whatever, then I guess people's family members or partners or friends or whoever's closest to them would be able to make that call to be like, maybe we'll keep this one just for ourselves and just to hold this person's memory. But if there's like little songs and stuff that could have been really great, then I think that's really cool. I mean, like there's the UK band Viola Beach, who's like very sadly passed away 4 or 5 years ago now. Like they put out a record, and a lot of the stuff was demos or things that had been, they'd done like live sessions or something, and then people had remixed and remastered them so that they sounded a bit more like studio standards. And I think that was really great because those young guys didn't actually get to release their album because of like the horrible circumstances of what happened, but it let all of their fans get the album that they would have put out, and it's an absolutely great album. And so yeah, I mean, essentially in a long-winded sort of way, I've just said I guess it's dependent on the person really, but yeah, for sure. I think it's okay, like broadly.
Oh, as a fan, you always want to hear more music. Our question is always, would the artist have actually been happy with what was released? I know this is so tricky because of everything, and we've noticed that it's kind of been happening a little bit more recently, and more frequently than we would like. And the reason why we ask this is we want to bring up the concept of artist wills and putting this into a contract, since, as you said, everyone's different and everyone has different thoughts on what can be touched and what cannot be touched and what should be used and what shouldn't. So we think that the artist should have a say in some form.
That's actually really interesting. I never really thought about that. I mean, there are like massive artists who have obviously passed away, and there will be a sort of breadth of material that hadn't been released. So, and because it's that artist's intellectual property, then I think it's actually a really interesting point, and I totally never thought about that before. Maybe that should be kind of looked at more so when a will is created. If an artist is maybe sitting on like a pile of music that hasn't been released or whatever, then they were able to write that in and say, I'd want tracks 5, 6, and 7 released, but not the rest of it, or whatever. Just that's interesting.
Like Prince, I think, has a vault of unreleased music.
Oh yeah, no, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's pretty interesting to see. Like, I don't personally know if any of it's actually been released recently, but it exists somewhere.
Yeah. No, it's. I'm sure that will be something that will be looked at, more, and hopefully it can bring about like positive change in the sense that the fans of the artist get a little bit more music after that person's passed, and then the person that's passed away is their sort of legacy is maintained in the way they would want it to be maintained. So yeah, for sure. No, that's a cool idea.
Can you describe your band's sound for me in 3 words?
Scottish, upbeat, indie, I guess. Like when we were making the track listing for the record, because we had had like 20 plus demos that we were picking from to make the eventual 12-track album, and we were pretty conscious that we didn't want every song to have the sort of the Strokes tempo drum beat behind it, where it's just like fast drums. We were quite conscious of let's make sure that we've got slightly different feels on the album. So you get that on Summer, and then Shout, and You and Me, and things like that, which is contained again in amongst. There's lots of fast indie songs on there, but we wanted it to kind of feel like a sort of live gig, where you have, the way you sort of traditionally structure a live gig is a big opening sort of like section of bangers and slightly slower, and then close with some more bangers and then a longer track to end the set. So that's kind of what we wanted to roughly structure it like that. And I think like I'm actually really happy with the track list, and I think it does flow together quite well.
I agree. I love how they all kind of lead into the first song always leads into the next song in a way where it's where you're listening to it and you're like, oh, okay, we're just continuing on this type of journey. It's not like there's this break up in the track listing. I've noticed that lately in some other artists. So I thought that was very, very refreshing to hear that it's just kind of continuing in this beautiful way.
Thank you.
So my next question for you is, how did you know that you wanted to be involved in music? Was there a moment where you like, this is it, this is what I want to do?
Well, the first bit of music the first involvement I ever had in music was playing the violin when I was in primary school, which is that elementary school in America? Is that what it's called? So when I was in that, and I absolutely hated playing the violin so much. I absolutely hated it. And when I got into secondary school, or high school, sorry, then I was still playing the violin, and I was kind of like, maybe it's all right, but I kind of just wanted to give it up. But my parents were like, just stick with it. You know, it's a good skill to have, I guess, just being able to read music and stuff. So I just stuck with it. And then when I got into music class in school, we learned the guitar, and we learned a couple of like Beatles songs just playing chords. And I was like, this is great. I just thought it was really cool. I didn't know the Beatles songs before we learned them or anything like that. So it wasn't even like I was like, oh, this is cool because I like this song. I just thought it was really cool to be able to sing and then accompany yourself on an instrument. And then from that point onwards, I was like, yeah, this is really cool. And that's when I started to get into bands. Like the Strokes particularly were like a big one for me. And I was just like, yeah, this is there's something here where I was like, this could be really cool. And then eventually, just like I started to write pretty terrible songs. But when I started playing them with my friends, I got a sense that I was like, there's something here that just it's just better than anything else that I want to do. So that's what really inspired me. And since I've been about 15, I've kind of always just wanted to be in a band. I wasn't really too interested in being by myself, like playing, just singing and playing the guitar. I was so much more interested in just being involved with 3 or 4 other musicians and just playing live. So being in a band, so learning the guitar and then just sort of getting the experience of being in a band is what really just drove me to want to do music as much as I could.
I like to say that the instrument picks the person, not necessarily the person picks the instrument.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
I feel like it's more common than you'd think, just because things kind of fall into place in a way where it's like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
I love how you said you started playing the violin first.
Oh.
I think.
Still got it. I've still got the violin, but I've not played it. I've played it in a long time. Maybe that can feature on album 2. Who knows?
I do agree that it does help with the introduction of like this is how to read music, and I have a quick question. In, I guess, high school, there you said secondary school.
Sure.
Is it common to learn the guitar in school?
Well, in my school, in music class, so everybody everyone in the whole year group takes music class,
okay.
And you do like a 3-week block where you like learn the guitar, and you do like a 3-week block where you learn the keyboard, so it's just like a little introduction to all of them. But then when you've been at high school for 2 years, then you get the choice. You can either continue to do music, or you can like stop doing music if you're not into it or whatever. So, but our school was actually really musical. So a lot the music classes were actually pretty big. Like a lot of people did continue on with it as they got like older, like towards the end of school and stuff as well.
That's so interesting, because where I am in 4th grade, you get tested to see if you have some sort of musical ability.
Oh, right. Wow. There you go.
And then you get fitted for an instrument that then becomes yours for however long
Oh,
you're in band.
so you don't get to pick your instrument. They give you the instrument.
Kind of like you make a list of 3 instruments you think you would want to play, and then they go, no, you're doing this one. So,
Yeah, wow, that's tough. It's much more casual in Scotland. You can kind of, well, in the UK you can kind of sort of pick and choose, and for your exam as well, you have to do 2 instruments. So you have to get good on one, and then you play like, so for your exam you play like a longer piece of music on your good one, and then your second one you play like a short piece of music. But you still have to learn 2. So that's probably a good thing, I guess.
yeah, that's so cool. I was in band when I was in school, and in my senior year I was fortunate enough to take a class where we learned every wind and brass instrument.
Oh, cool.
I can't play them adequately well. I can probably only play like hot cross buns on most of them, but it was fun to learn the different instruments because I only read treble clef beforehand, so it was nice to learn.
Oh, yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah, no, I think like I would say like learning just a little bit about sort of music and music theory does help like a lot. And I think like for me particularly learning about chords and chord structures and chord sequences has been really handy in learning, you know, even just being able to listen to a song and realize what I like about it, like musically. I think that has been a big help. But I mean, obviously it doesn't work for everyone because there's loads of people who are self-taught and don't know how to read music at all and are amazing musicians. So it's just again, it's just different for different folk.
That's so true. I feel like music theory does help in a sense because I've noticed at least those who have a musical theory background are able to kind of not always do what everyone else is doing in a sense, like changing up time signatures or keys and things like that. So it's always interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it's, if you, as I was sort of saying, if you can recognize, like, particularly when you're writing or something like that, if you write something, you go, oh, that sounds like this other thing. If you're able to work out why it sounds like that other thing, then it's maybe slightly easier to change it and then make it slightly more original or in your own style. So for me anyway, music theory has helped in writing and stuff, but yeah, again, it might not work for everyone.
So my next question for you is, what musician inspires you to be a better musician?
I don't know, just like I think when you go on tour with a band, you definitely get inspired to do a lot of different things. Like we went on tour with a band called Circa Waves, and that was like a big tour for us. We were playing, you know, supporting them in big venues, and just seeing the way that they were a band that we looked up to when we were, you know, when we were like 17 and stuff. So for one, being on tour with them was really exciting and everything. But then also just seeing the way that they know how to structure a set. They know how to they know when the crowd's going to go crazy for a particular song or whatever. So when you go on tour with a band, you particularly if you're supporting them, it's like quite easy, I think, to look up to what they're doing and stuff. So like on that tour, I think we learned a lot from Circa Waves, just in terms of how to be a kind of solid indie performing band and things. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, I know it sounds quite cheesy, but like Jamie and Dylan, who are my 2 bandmates, like I do get inspired by them as well, because we all kind of bounce off each other in a sort of live gig setting, and we always just want to make our gigs as good as they can be. So yeah, and I've played with other people and I've played in different bands with other people, but I've never enjoyed it as much, and I've never got the same sort of feeling, and I don't think I'm as good if I'm not playing with Jamie and Dylan. So yeah, them probably as well.
It's kind of like you all make each other better, or like play off.
I'd say so. Yeah, definitely. Aye.
And I think you're 100% right by saying like bands tour that people tour with, and even just looking up to people in the more local scene, kind of challenges everyone to become better. And I think that speaks volumes for the music industry going forward, since it's not always, oh, what's on the radio, is what's making people want to be like, okay, this is what's next or what to do.
No, I couldn't agree more, really. I mean, I remember when we were, 15, playing in the local venues in Edinburgh, and we'd support like a local band, and then I remember we'd watch the show, and then we'd all kind of almost like analyze it as if it was like a piece of academic work or something. We'd be like, what made that, like, that bassist was like jumping about the stage. We have to do stuff like that. So I think being a young band and playing shows as much as you can, like, will definitely just make you better, because you'll see gigs, you'll see how crowds react to gigs and stuff. So so as you say, like, just getting out there, going to local venues, supporting local bands, watching local bands, like, it does make a difference for you as a player as well.
What is the local scene like where you are?
It's not too bad. I mean, Edinburgh is like quite a bit smaller than Glasgow, which is the other the other big city in Scotland. And at the moment, the Glasgow music scene is really thriving. There's loads and loads and loads of bands who are, getting signed to labels and getting picked up by management and playing festivals. Like, playing festivals not just in the UK, but like playing festivals abroad and things like that. So the Glasgow music scene particularly is really thriving. And Edinburgh is good, but it kind of has limitations put on it, because all of the venues have to shut down live music at 10 p.m. So, and there's like a very, very, very strict curfew about that. And it's not the venue's fault, because I'm sure if the venues could, they would have the live music go on later, but they get pretty heavily fined if the music goes on till 10:30, 11 p.m. or whatever. So it kind of doesn't. It's not a very kind of rock and roll sort of experience going to see a local band in Edinburgh, because the opening act is on about 7 o'clock, which is, that's kind of like as like dinner time. Like, people have their dinner about then. It's not a very sort of rock and roll sort of thing. And the headline band has to be finished before 10 o'clock. And, most headline bands, if you play a gig in Glasgow or the rest of the UK, you don't usually go on stage till about 10 o'clock. So, unfortunately, Edinburgh kind of has those limitations put upon it. But there is still a thriving music scene. There's lots of local bands. There's good places to rehearse, and there's good producers and things like that. And as a city, Edinburgh is, very artistic, and it's home obviously to the Fringe Festival, which is like the biggest art festival in the whole world. So yeah, I mean, fingers crossed. There can be a bit more of a resurgence of new and kind of local bands in Edinburgh over the next few while. But yeah, Glasgow particularly is doing amazing in Scotland, music wise, just now.
I didn't know that at 10 p.m. They couldn't play. Like, you have to stop.
Oh, it's rubbish. Yeah, absolutely rubbish. It's weird as well, because it doesn't make it, to me, it doesn't make any sense, because then after 10 p.m. the club nights always start. But and club nights can be very, very loud. So I don't know what it is about live music particularly that has to stop at 10 p.m. But yeah, it's such a strict thing. Like, if you from playing gigs in Edinburgh, once if you're the headline band, once you've pretty much walked off stage, someone will be through the back telling you to immediately start packing up and getting stuff in your van. So it's not the most fun experience. And I can imagine as well, for bands who come on tour and they play Edinburgh, it can't be that fun an experience. So they probably much rather play in Glasgow. So yeah, who knows? The council in Edinburgh can be a little bit strict on things like that. But yeah, it is what it is.
I asked this because where I'm from, we don't really have a local music scene at all.
Right. Okay. Sure.
We have like one venue that will let the band play if you're lucky. So
right.
It's interesting to see how every place has their own type of like music culture. And I should probably preface, I'm from Staten Island, New York. Even though I'm part of the city, we don't really have a scene in our borough.
A big music scene. Sure. Right. Okay. Fair. Yeah. Well, the music scene in New York is obviously really good. We were meant to go out and play the New Colossus Festival in New York before, obviously that got well, there was like 2 days of it or whatever, but then it got cancelled. But our flights got cancelled anyway, so we couldn't go. But yeah, so like fingers crossed we'll get to play in New York at some time as well.
New York is such an interesting scene. I feel like Brooklyn's probably where it's at. For
Right,
more
okay,
local DIY, the city is kind of like stopover town. Well, Manhattan, yeah, it's kind of like everyone just kind of goes there and plays there. That's like a bigger name or somebody coming to visit, but they don't really have this like local scene. So it's always,
Okay.
yeah, it's a time, and I always kind of get upset. I travel to Jersey for shows just because it's closer
All right,
to where
nice.
I live, and it always upsets me because School of Rock was filmed on my campus.
That's class. Well, when you asked, oh, what inspired you to be in music, the truthful answer is actually the School of Rock movie.
Really?
But I didn't want to say it. So there you go.
Yes. Where Jack Black's kind of in the van pulling up to the school building, that's where I have class.
Oh, that's well funny. That's class.
So it's like so iconic, and it's inspired so many people, and then here we are with like nothing.
I know. It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah, I never realized the impact the movie had on people until like started like talking to people about it. Because after a while, like it's just the building I have class in. It's kind of hard to remember that something so eventful was there, and yeah, it's upsetting to think about it and be like, oh, we don't do that. Like we should, but we don't.
That is a shame. That is a shame. I mean, I could probably pretty confidently say that every person who I've ever met in a UK band would be able to quote some lines from School of Rock. I'm pretty sure I could say that with confidence.
So I want to know a little bit more about you. So what music are you currently listening to?
Well, I've been listening to the new Strokes album that they brought out, which was really cool. And I think it's good. It kind of shows that even after all like these years and all the different solo projects and stuff, like when they come together, they can still just make like great music that just sounds like the Strokes. So that was really good. And I've gotten into the band Gang of Youths, who are from Australia. So I've gotten into them quite a lot, just in passing. But to be honest, at the moment, I'm tend to listen to a lot more podcasts at the moment than I'm listening to just tunes, and I think that's because I've been like so involved with our album and everything that like my sort of appetite for music has dwindled a wee bit at the moment. So I always go through phases of stuff like that. But I would say the Strokes album I was like really impressed by when that came out.
What is your favorite album in your personal collection? And by personal collection, I mean you physically own the album.
Physical one. I mean, I've got Is This It? Like, the Strokes first record. I've got that. Like, because I don't have like tons of vinyl. But like, so that would probably be that. Maybe my actual favorite record, which is like one of my favorite records that I've had for ages and ages, is I've got the live CD of when Green Day did their American Idiot tour. So I've got what they recorded this one of the sets that they played in England when they did that tour, and I used to listen to that CD like all the time. And like whenever I've gone through a period of like clearing out CDs or giving CDs to charity or whatever, I've always kept that one. So I'd maybe say that's one of my favorites.
That's so cool. I feel like the albums people own or decide to actually purpose say a lot about who they are. I know that's
sure.
So strange, but I don't know. I personally think that like if you take the time to purchase an album in full or listen to an album in full and then be like, yes, I need to physically have a copy, it's something special in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, with the kind of resurgence of vinyl as well, it gives people like much more of a physical thing, because like you know you can buy like vinyl frames and stuff if you just want the artwork on your wall or whatever. So like I think as you say, yeah, especially now that vinyl's a lot bigger, it gives people much more incentive to be like, I physically want to own this in a sort of like a big sort of way. So yeah, for sure.
the variants of your album are so pretty. I just had to say that they look so
Oh, thanks
cool.
very much. Yeah, no, I'm really pleased how they all turned out, and like I like that we did 3 different colors for the records as well. Like I've got the white one, but most of my friends got the blue one. But I think no, I think they all look really cool.
I love variants because they're all so unique in a sense. Like it's not
Mhm.
just the stereotypical black album, and there's so much. I don't know. I feel like it's just something special to see. Like the artist took the time to be like, yes, this is what we want to see, and
Mhm.
it's amazing.
Yeah, sure. Well, all of the records we've apart from our EP, which we just did the EP on just regular black vinyl, but our first vinyl we ever put out was yellow. Second one we ever put out was we did like a splash one where it's like 2 different colors like melded into each other, and then obviously with all of these we've got 2 color variants, and then there's the classic black one as well. So like yeah, it's cool. I mean, there's some like lovely looking vinyls out there as well. Like I've got a clear vinyl as well, which I'd never really seen before. But I just saw it in a shop and I just picked it up. I think like that particularly looks amazing. I think it looks really cool.
I think the album art helped to kind of set the tone for the album. Like remember like going to record stores where you're like, oh, this album art looks pretty cool. Let me just check it out. It was kind of like that experience in a sense.
No, like I think you're right for sure. It can like when you see a cover of a record, particularly in a shop, I think if it's aesthetically pleasing, you're much more likely to flip it over and look at what it might actually be, or maybe just give it a try. So and some of the best albums like ever have really good album artworks as well. So you know the two don't necessarily go hand in hand, but a lot of the time they do. So yeah, that's cool as well.
So how did you pick the album cover art for your debut album?
Sure. Well, we kind of wanted to theme everything around initially around sort of like a blue sky and clouds, and that's where everything sort of stemmed from. We were originally gonna use these big sort of like prop clouds that you would use in like if you were putting on a theatre show or whatever, and they're essentially just big balls of cotton wool. So we were initially going to use them and try and sort of photograph them in places, but it was proven really difficult to get them to look realistic enough that it didn't just look like we were holding it on a string or whatever. So we were like, that's probably not going to work. So we continued on with the sort of cloud idea, and then we got some of the inspiration we got was from collages, and that's where everything just sort of stemmed from there. And we put out a brief on this website called Creative Commission, which is like a really good website for like self-employed creative people to find work in photography and design and video editing and things like that. So we put out the brief on there, and then this chap called Jared, who's he's from Cape Town, and he just sent over a little like example of what stuff he sort of does, and we were like, yeah, this looks great. And then we just worked with him on everything, and the whole thing of having swimming pools where the water was replaced with clouds just kind of became a theme for the whole record. And yeah, that's it. We wanted to just make everything look sort of nostalgic, but also summery as well, and bright and blue. And I think it's nice as well that we've sort of maybe like slightly unintentionally, but like we've carved this sort of aesthetic for ourselves with this record, because like even the press shots that we've used are like shot against like a blue sky background. When we were out just taking the pictures, we were in a studio as well, but we got better pictures just being outside against the blue sky and stuff. So it's nice how that all kind of ties in. And I like the collage as well, because you can take one element from a picture that you really like, cut it out, edit it, reshape it, and then put it on top of another element or something else that you like. And it's cool as well because all of the collages were done physically, so they all exist in Jared's workshop, and then the actual final thing is a picture of the physical collage. So that's just a nice little detail as well, I think.
It's like this nice little personal touch that you don't really hear about most of the time, which is so cool just to see that. My next question for you is, if you could change one thing about the music industry as it is today, what would it be and why?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think there does need to be, like, there's a lot of things which in the music industry are pretty, they're pretty unfair and pretty difficult and stuff. And I think there definitely needs to be a kind of like a change in viewpoint in terms of like diversity within festivals and things like that. For the gender balance of festivals is pretty one-sided, and obviously that's difficult for me to put this point across because I and my band have obviously benefited from that. But yeah, I think it's interesting when you see a lineup that is essentially 50-50 gender balanced, that you go, nobody looks at that lineup and goes, that's not a good lineup. But it's sort of the idea that I think when people who maybe don't really care or aren't really interested or not bothered by it, when they hear that that people are striving for a kind of 50-50 sort of gender split from artists on a lineup, they probably think in their heads it's not going to be good. But when you do see these festivals, like with those lineups, it's never like that. So I think that's what I'd maybe change, is just kind of the sort of general attitude towards that the good acts get booked because they're really good. So it doesn't, like, if female acts get booked for a festival, it's not just because they're females, because they're very good. They're good musicians. People want to see them play and things. So I just guess that sort of general attitude, and it is something that I have noticed is changing in the UK. There is more balanced lineups on festivals now. So yeah, and again, as I say, it's difficult for me to kind of be like because I really want to play festivals as well, and so do loads of bands. But I think once that sort of playing field is leveled, I think it will actually make for a much better festival experience for everyone. So that's one thing that I think is changing, and probably we will in the next couple of years see that much more, I think, anyway. And yeah, and as well, just it's I think a sort of general shift in the kind of attitude of like looking at a musician as like a proper real job, and and like paying acts fairly and things. I think one thing that makes touring really hard when you're a small band is that when you play a venue, you don't get fed, or and you don't get paid very much. So I think that's one thing that I would maybe change, is just like venues thinking, well, how can we support smaller acts when they've come from halfway across the country to play a 30-minute set? Maybe we should just give them some dinner or something like that. That's another little detail that I think is slightly overlooked, because you get paid like so little money to play the show. Then if you're having to also dip into your own pocket or the band's pocket to feed yourselves, and then fuel your van and then pay for hotels, it really stacks up. So yeah, those are two things that I've always kind of like been part of our sort of thought process being in a band.
I have my own slight gripes with how bills are created for tours. I've noticed, at least in America, this has happened more frequently. A lot of bills are created based on Spotify monthly listeners. And
oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, I personally don't think, as a fan, I should be seeing a band's Spotify monthly listeners. Like, obviously, keep it for the band and the business, but I feel like it's shifting perceptions so much that it's influencing who gets on a bill, because sometimes you have the same three bands on this different tours and it's the same bill every time. It's like, why?
Well, the thing is as well, monthly listeners don't they do not translate necessarily into ticket sales or like how big a band is live. Um, there's like particularly if you look at some people who have had recently really big success on their Spotify as a result of a song going viral on TikTok. But they maybe wouldn't be able to sell 100 tickets, but they've got like millions and millions of monthly listeners. So I think looking at monthly listeners is obviously an important thing now, because Spotify is so prevalent within the music industry and how people get booked. But you kind of do have to take it with a pinch of salt, and also look at the band in terms of, well, how big venues did they play on their last tour? What are they playing on this tour? So that is a good point. I didn't know festivals kind of were sort of stacked in that way in the US somewhat.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I don't know. I don't even know why. I feel like it's maybe managers, or yeah, I guess managers or booking agents kind of going, yeah, they have a lot of listeners, they'll do well on a festival or a tour.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's just like, it's sort of like, well, this band's got this many points, this band's got this many points, that one's got more than that one, so we'll just book that one. But it doesn't monthly listeners, as we're sort of saying, don't translate into ticket sales necessarily. It doesn't always work like that.
I feel like here at least it's definitely 100% true. Like, people won't necessarily come out to a show because, yeah, the band I like is playing, but I only know one song. Like, I don't know. It's so strange to think that.
No, that is strange. Yeah, no, for sure. That is weird. Yeah.
And I love how you said, like, some songs like go TikTok viral.
Yeah, sure.
And I don't know. I feel like if I'm listening to a band for the first time, I will listen to their most listened to song, but I'll also go through an album and be like, this one doesn't have a lot of listens. Let's see what it sounds like. Because I feel like sometimes those songs are a better representation of an artist than the one that went viral.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. I guess when you listen to the full record, as opposed to, because there's lots of bands who have one really big song, but then nobody really is into any of the other stuff. And I think that'll kind of give you an indication of, like, because occasionally some people who aren't that good at songwriting will just come out with like an absolute bang that goes massive, but then they've got nothing to follow it up with or whatever. So I think you should definitely, if you think, well, this band's good, just delve into the back catalogue and see what other songs you like, and then they might become your favorite band, or you might realize that, yeah, this is not really for me, but I do like this one song, so I'll stick that on a playlist or whatever.
I also think sometimes like singles that are released now aren't necessarily the best representation of an album sometimes, because you're lacking the context of why the song is what it is. And I feel like Spotify keeps promoting the single culture, where people release 4 to 5 singles and then there's a 7-song EP. It's interesting to me.
No, it's difficult, because I mean, like, it's just kind of how music is structured now, and just how you kind of retain sort of like a fan base and stuff is, and as I was saying there, when you're in a small band and you're touring, it's really expensive and you don't really have that much money. So I guess that's the benefit of Spotify in a big way, is that if you're able to record a new song every 3 months, 4 months, and you can do that pretty inexpensively, even just as a small artist, then at least it gives your fans like something to continuously put out, because it is like really expensive to record an album. So if you're like a wee band, it's difficult to do that. And then although Spotify doesn't pay loads, at least if your fans are streaming, you'll get a little bit of money back, which you can then put back into the band fund and then do that. So yeah, it's interesting how Spotify has kind of changed the way music is structured and released and stuff. But I think I personally, I do think it has allowed a lot more small bands to kind of get a fan base, which has allowed them to tour in places they maybe previously would have had no like sort of fan base in at all. But yeah, just it's an interesting thing.
I think it's great for exposure. Not gonna lie, I use it every day. But I
Oh, definitely.
do wish there were some other factors that would slightly change to be more beneficial for artists.
Sure, yeah, sure.
And now we have my last question. So,
Okay. No.
okay, what are your goals for 2020? You can do the year or the decade. I'm gonna leave that up to you.
I mean, I mean, the goal for 2020 for the rest of this year, I guess, is just to, like, I don't know, just hope that the world gets back to normal, and I think like an achievable goal that we're really setting ourselves is just, you know, at some point being able to get back into a studio all together, and record some new stuff, because we've written lots and lots and lots, which is nice because we don't usually get a period of time to just focus solely on writing a breadth of new material. So that's been really nice. But then it just makes you more eager to get into a studio, which obviously we can't do at the moment. And we wouldn't want to really do anything in a studio until it was safe and we were able to do it in the right way, because like it's no fun if you're in a studio and then, you know, one person's got to be in one room talking to someone through a headset or whatever, and you have to, you know, be 6 feet apart from everyone and stuff. That's not the way that like good music is going to be created and stuff. So yeah, I think a nice achievable goal for us is to just get back into a studio and record a bit of the new music that we've written. And then also we've got shows booked for the end of the year, which were meant to happen in May, but have obviously been rescheduled. So fingers crossed the world is sort of in a safe place that we'd be able to play those shows again. And that would be really cool because at that point in November, our album would have pretty much been out for like 6 months. So all our fans would like know all the words, which if we played the shows in May, they wouldn't, because the album would have only been out for a couple of days or whatever. So that's really exciting as well. But again, we wouldn't really want to play those shows unless it was safe, because kind of the safety of our fans, the venue staff, and then our crew who come with us, and then ourselves, I guess, lastly, is really important as well. And I think live music will come back, and it will come back stronger and better than ever, because people have really, really missed it. But I think it has to be done at the right time and in the safest way for everyone, really. Otherwise, if we do it at the wrong time, things might go backwards as opposed to forwards, which is not what anyone wants. So those are two sort of goals we're really looking forward to, like hopefully achieving, playing a couple of shows at the end of the year, and yeah, just getting in and recording eventually.
Well, I want to thank you so much for talking with me. It was such a pleasure. I had a wonderful conversation, so thank you.
Oh, you're very well. No, thank you for having me.
Of course. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. No, you too. Thanks again for having me. You too. Catch you later on.